Like Eben this morning, I'm a walker, so I'm going to give this mic a try. Thank you. Just first, a heartfelt thanks to Doug and the organizers for including us, inviting us here today. When we first met you 2 months ago, we were really intrigued. We've long felt that a big conversation like this is way overdue. We're sort of sometimes get lost in the trees, and it's time to go back and look at the forest. I've just got more and more interested as we've been talking. So very quickly, I can make this quick because a lot of what's been covered in your great compostability queue up, that means I can skip through this and you won't hear me actually talk much about compostability. So what I'm going to cover, very quick context on NatureWorks and Ingeo. I'm going to do this with a quick 3-minute video because it does it much more visually and concisely than I could do with slides. I'll cue that up in a second. And then Doug has asked us to really switch and give, as a company 10 years now, a decade out in the market in the bioplastics arena, to give sort of an overview of the landscape. And again, I can do this pretty easily because you've heard a lot of this from Alexa, from Romano.
With Ingeo plastics and fiber.
Very quickly at a high level and hopefully try to sort out some of the confusion. And then
made from plants,
come
not
back and wrap up with a case study
not
of
oil.
plastic.
NatureWorks is dedicated to providing new, low-carbon.
Walk you through that cradle-to-cradle loop and show you how it's done, and I hope keep the conversation elevated, not just on designing for recyclability, but designing for the environment, which means where it's from, how it's made, what it does to us in our bodies, and where it goes, all of those. So I hope, Doug, between us and with Plasticity going forward, we can very much keep it at a high level and not just about the trash disposal problem, because that is. So let's go, just cue up the video, and I hope the vocal works on this. Let's see. Thank you, Marika.
With Ingeo plastics and fibers made from plants, not oil, NatureWorks is dedicated to providing new, low-carbon materials which enable innovative, sustainable, and environmentally responsible product development. Ingeo presents a new point of view for enhancing the design story of products through responsible material choice. In a few short years, we've moved from concept to reality. Today, NatureWorks can highlight over 40 families of lifestyle products made from Ingeo and currently produced for hundreds of brands and retailers, selling to the consumer worldwide. And in markets which include food serviceware, food packaging, flexible films, health and beauty, clothing, personal care, household and durable products, and consumer electronics. We start with annually renewable resources, simple plant sugars created from carbon dioxide by the sun's energy. Fermenting these sugars in a process similar to making beer or wine produces the building blocks for Ingeo. In further processing, water is removed to create Ingeo. Mother Nature looks at greenhouse gases as a feedstock. It's what trees, plants, and huge structures like coral reefs are built from. At NatureWorks, we're doing the same thing, using our best technologies to turn yesterday's greenhouse gases into today's performance consumer products. We are literally locking up the carbon that would otherwise contribute to global warming as the backbone, the basic building block for Ingeo plastics and fibers. The results of this technology are Ingeo plastics and fibers with ultra-low carbon footprint and fossil energy requirements. Because of this, for many brands, Ingeo has become a point of inspiration for them to rethink the materials that they're choosing to build their own brand attributes. Ingeo offers new options for achieving what some call cradle-to-cradle product design after the end of a product's useful life. These include options such as composting and new models for recycling, both of which will significantly reduce what we put in landfills. With Ingeo, NatureWorks is dedicated to meeting the world's needs today without compromising the Earth's ability to meet the needs of tomorrow.
Thank you. If we could go to the next slide. So that's it in terms of a company and product intro for me. What I'm going to do in the interest of what I've not done is brought a huge sort of carpet bag full of samples in the interest of carbon footprinting and also just my travel schedule. So what I'm going to do is pass around what we call an Ingeo lookbook, which is a couple of these I'll get going around the room, which is more pages than you can look at, but sort of a sampler of the sorts of products you saw up here. So that is my product pass around, if you will. So now I want to take a step back, not talk about NatureWorks or Ingeo, but talk about bioplastics in general with a quick primer. And I'm going to do this using some slides from a new, relatively new US organization, the Bioplastics Council, which was set up by a group of companies, BASF, DuPont, NatureWorks, all moving into the biopolymer space. And sort of just go through quickly, and I can do this quickly because it's been well framed out already. Biopolymers, and I'm using the semantics deliberately here. I'm saying polymer, not plastic, because plastics and fibers are made from polymers, and I want to be much more holistic. About half our markets are in fibers, textiles, non-wovens. So we keep trying to acknowledge really what we're doing is making biopolymers that fuel broad fibers and plastics markets. So biopolymers can be called biopolymers because of where they come from, bio-based origins, and I think that's been pretty clear from what you've already heard today. Or they can be called bioplastics, biopolymers, with nothing to do with where they come from, but because they can be biodegradable in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes this leads to the fundamental confusion, because some plastics, like our own, like the Ingeo family of grades we make, are both 100% bio-based and biodegradable in the right format. So herein lies a little bit of the confusion. We're not alone. There are a whole family of polymers called PHAs you heard about from Romani also that are both bio-based and biodegradable in certain environments. You've also heard extensively about bio-based replacements for some of today's incumbent plastics. Our industry colleagues, Braskem, is in the room. They've done a wonderful job making 100% bio-based PE. You've heard about Coke's bio-based PET already. Those are polymers that are in no way, shape, or form are meant to be or designed to be or wanted to be biodegradable. They're meant to be low carbon footprints for today's performance plastics. On the other side of the equation are materials that may be totally fossil fuel based. BASF makes an example, a polymer called PBAT for the technologist in the room. It is fossil based but very quickly degrades. So it has a place in this too. So we've already gone through this extensively, and Alexa mentioned the certifications. There are very strong consensus-driven certifications for bio-based, and as well as not just compostability, but biodegradability, which means the time scale in the environment, the types of microbes. Is it biodegrading in a compost, an industrial composter, or in a marine environment, if it should unfortunately get there, or in soil? It matters. And so that's the sorts of credentials are what's lead to some of the confusion here, and we are super thankful with some of California's strong labeling laws and the enforcement they're putting behind those is going to help clear up with some of the greenwashing. I'm just going to throw this out and skip right past it, but if this is useful, I'd be glad to share it. It's sort of a map where we look at categorizing all plastics out there in the market by where they come from and where they go at the end of their life. And really, the conventional plastics are down here, lower quadrant, yellow font. We're polar opposite, 180 degrees apart, completely bio-based and biodegradable with Ingeo, upper right. And this, I think, sort of points to some of the confusion that can exist. There's a wide span of partially bio-based, biodegradability in different formats, and we sort of map things in here. So the other point I'd make is how big that landscape is versus the conventional plastics, which are occupy but one quadrant. So let me just wrap up. I've sort of told you what biopolymers are. I want to just mention what they're not. And this may sound odd, but it's pretty critical. And Alexa sort of touched on this. There's a lot of mythology and misperception and greenwashing occurring out there. Daniela, I know we've shared notes on this and horror stories about so-called degradable additives, magic dust, pixie dust that can be added to conventional plastics to make them, quote, disappear and degrade. You may hear the term oxo-degradable additives used. What I want to be clear on is that biopolymers are not designed to fragment and disappear. That's really just hiding a problem and making microplastics, which are even worse for the environment. Rigorously credentialed biopolymers, if they're designed to decompose at all, do so with third-party ASTM standards. This is such an issue that a leading nonprofit, Californians Against Waste, has actually started to use some of the strong laws on the books in California to put in front of the California Attorney General some of the worst offenders, and I've shown you a couple here, to try and shut them down and basically file a lawsuit against them, which I think is very timely, and we're sort of really thankful of California's leading position in this. So that was a quick context on what biopolymers are. Let me just wrap up with really A couple more slides here, just the shape of the landscape. We often get asked if biopolymers are really a fad, a passing thing, and I don't know any better way to do this than to sort of do a quick thought experiment. And I'm not going to ask you to close your eyes, but just imagine you get up, you go to wherever you get your headlines in the morning, whether it's Twitter these days, a website, or a good old-fashioned newspaper. And if you read these type headlines, for example, I won't read them to you. You know, we've got folks either saying they did put 5 billion products in bio-based packaging last year, or committing to move their products to 100% bio-based, shifting health and beauty lineup to bio-based. America's favorite condiment, what would that be? Shifting to bio-based. Another company, automotive, changing its whole supply chain. Somebody else committing to complete polystyrene replacement. And lastly, what if a global sports brand and an automaker, an interesting partnership, announced they were teaming up to go after bio-based? Well, you know where I'm going with this, obviously. These are not hypothetical headlines. These brands on the left and the products on the right are the folks behind this. You've heard a lot about these folks today, but this is all within the last year, and the bottom one is really literally in the last 2 weeks, when newcomers Ford and Nike joined a couple of the brands above, forming what they called the Plant PET Technology Collaborative to really drive this into the market. So this is obviously not a trend or a fad, it's a movement. And what's really validating to us, and tremendously rewarding, frankly, is that we are but one of these bullets. We are the guys, Ingeo is behind this Danone, or Danone, depending on where you live in the world, replacement of its polystyrene line. They wanted to get away from styrene. They changed their entire Activia line in Germany to an Ingeo-based cup. Stonyfield did the same thing, the organic dairy in the US. It's great for us to see that this is bigger than us. This is a real movement. I often get accused of sort of cherry-picking headlines, but I hope you get the sense from this conference that's absolutely not the case. And that sort of tectonic shift, if you will, in the landscape from the last slide is what leads us to, we like to talk about this entering, really, we think that there's been 3 eras of bioplastics. We're now entering the 3rd. And I don't want this to sound like a Lord of the Rings trilogy, so I want to be real specific what I'm talking about here. If we rewind about 20 years, what we called the first era, it was a little bit simplistic. It was, you know, anytime anybody said bioplastics, it was interpreted to be bioplastics are for degrading. Very one-dimensional. It was sort of this single focus on getting rid of litter, a big challenge, but a little bit one-dimensional and a little bit simplistic. And bio-based was really the exception. It was fossil-based. What happened through the 2000s, with thanks to folks like Al Gore, other thought leaders, really getting in front of the world and getting buy-in that we had a climate change problem, the potential for bioplastics to sequester carbon became quite clear. And the focus became much more on intensive carbon labeling, folks like the Carbon Trust in the UK, product labeling, and all about LCA. This was a good step, and it didn't throw away era number 1. It incorporated it, which is good. The downside to this is that often, and I think this has been mentioned, you may have gotten at it, Daniela, LCAs don't price in the externalities, the impact on landscape or deforestation or other implications. They're a little bit just sort of arithmetic, add things up, get a number, a little bit simplistic. So what we're pleased to see happening now is really what we call the 3rd era, where it's no longer bioplastics versus plastics and being perceived as a debate. Really literally, and I hope it's totally clear from the previous slide, plastics are becoming bio. The only sustainable, renewable feedstock going forward is going to be things that are renewable.